I go back to my analogy that you are not truly experiencing growth unless you're uncomfortable. So
Mhm.
never get too comfortable, right? If you have aspirations to be a leader in whatever industry that you're supporting, you have to be willing to climb outside that box and experience new things. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. You will be forced to have to learn. I always had this vision of what I considered a facility manager and the standard that I would hold myself to in order to call myself a facility manager. And that vision was always having a fundamental understanding of all aspects of the operation. And that includes soft services, hard services, food service, any service delivery from a facilities operation that is contributing to the goal of that organization. And so I think you really have to take on those new experiences in order to, and again, just my own perception here, in order for to feel comfortable in my own skin to call myself a facility manager at one point in my career, that I had to have those experiences, right? I had to be uncomfortable. I had a necessity to learn things that I had no prior knowledge of. And I understood the commitment that came with that, the obligation, but I knew that the end result was going to make me a more seasoned, a better facility manager at the end of the day.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert, and I can't wait to get into the conversation with today's guest. He is someone with extensive experience in facility operations and an impressive career trajectory. He's worked for multiple notable companies such as Procter & Gamble, Able Services, and ESFM USA, where he has honed his expertise in managing large-scale facilities and maintaining high standards for operational performance. In 2021, he was a nominee for the BOMA Boston Chief Engineer of the Year Award, a testament to his leadership, technical expertise, and commitment to excellence in the facilities management field. Associate Director of Facility Operations at AstraZeneca, David D'Amore, welcome to the show.
Jay, thank you so much for the warm introduction. Really a pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely, David. I'm thrilled that you're here. I know you were flexible with me to get here, so hey, man, we made it.
We did. Yeah, very much looking forward to the discussion today.
Cool, me too. So, with everything we just listed in the introduction, all of your experience, your journey throughout facilities and otherwise, what's been your biggest lesson learned?
Great question. I would really say that a lack of focus and misallocated efforts, can be highly detrimental to both, from a personal perspective as well from an organizational perspective in terms of, mitigating success. And really that's done in several ways. I'm happy to expand on that. For individuals, so from a personal perspective, reduce productivity. And what I mean by that is, when efforts are scattered, tasks generally take longer to complete, leading to inefficiencies and missed opportunities, right? The another one would be increased stress and burnout, is a very real thing. So, constantly shifting between priorities, whereby working on low impact tasks can really lead to frustration and in addition to exhaustion. I know that, I've experienced that many times throughout my career path. And then also missed career growth. So without clear focus, personal development stagnates, reducing chances of promotions and new opportunities. That's always a mitigating factor in trying to, attain some levels of success. Also, poor decision making. So a lack of clear goals leads to, generally impulsive choices that don't necessarily align with long-term objectives. And, finally, I would say really lower satisfaction. Accomplishments feel hollow if they don't contribute meaningfully to personal or professional aspirations. So, that really, I think, summarizes the personal impact of that. And in terms of from an organizational standpoint, I would say, wasted resources, primarily being that time, money, and people power are somewhat squandered on projects that don't necessarily align with the organization's strategic objectives. And also it creates a lack of competitive edge. So, a lot of organizations that fail to focus on their core strengths lose market position to more disciplined competitors, frankly, especially in the life science industry. Also decreased employee engagement. Teams become disengaged quickly when they see that, that their work is leading nowhere or constantly shifting priorities. It's very distracting. And, these can all lead to poor financial performance, right? So misallocated efforts can result in lower returns on investment, inefficiencies, as well as, missed revenue targets. And finally, I would say that, it will promote a weak organizational culture to some extent because a lack of direction leads to significant confusion, demotivation, and also high employee turnover. And I know that, currently with the pressures in the labor market, that's something that, I think is taken the forefront and we've all experienced that, as well as, and I'm sure you're well aware, a lot of our peers are aware of how hard that can be to find, the right talent.
Absolutely. That was amazing, and that was a lot. So I have follow-up questions. I took a bunch of notes when you were going through that. Now, I don't know if you said at the beginning and I missed it, but previously we had talked about, I think you categorized what you just ran through as the five pillars of both personal and organizational. Is that right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. I love that. Where did you come up with that? Is that a framework you learned?
No, well, so of course, in preparation for this podcast, I was really trying to dig deep as to the backbone of that of some of these questions, and trying to understand again from my personal experience things that I've witnessed over my career, and the impact that they've had subsequently on, again, both myself personally and from an organizational standpoint. And in each category, those five items are really the ones that really stuck out to me as far as being the most impactful,
Mm.
the most the ones that would inhibit some level of success.
So one thing I wanted to ask you a little more about, David, was, you mentioned low impact tasks. Every one of us is faced with low impact tasks on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. Like, we can choose to do them, we can delegate them, we could delete them. But I want, like, and you tied it to burnout. So could you expand on that a bit and how you actually manage or deal with that or lead that?
Sure. So, again, 30,000 foot elevation, low impact tasks on a repetitive basis really stimulate a lack of meaning and purpose. And what I mean by that is, work that consists primarily of the same repetitive things over and over again. I would say that our team members struggle to see how their efforts contribute to the overall, performance and goal of the organization. And so, over time, a lack of meaningful progress, it drains motivation, drains innovation. And so, I think, in order to course correct from there, we really need to, provide our teams an understanding of exactly how these tasks, whether low impact or otherwise, are contributing, to our personal and organizational success. So, really showing our employees that they have skin in the game, no matter what the task is critically important, to our end results, right? So every task is a cog within that wheel. And in order for that wheel to turn, effectively, and to maintain momentum, these tasks have to be accomplished. So it's just really driving some meaning behind those tasks, with the greater understanding of what that big picture scenario is and what that larger impact is. And we
Mhm.
commonly say to our teams that, understand that, even from a hard services perspective, you're supporting, lab operations with installing a regulator, let's say. Well, that regulator is now promoting research and development that is going to go on to potentially impact a patient outcome at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
so what we try to do is just build value in those tasks and understand that, as low impact as they may be, they all effectively bubble up into a larger picture that has real world impact.
So you also tied it to draining motivation and inspiration. That really hit me when you said that. It's like, if you once you lose that, you might as well be doing it for nothing. So
Yeah,
that's
really what we don't want to do, and what we try to stay away from is a sense of stagnation, right? We
mhm.
don't want our team members feeling that, that their work has become so redundant or unchallenging that they experience disengagement, a high level of frustration, and then eventually, the burnout comes, right?
Right.
And so, this, in order to promote employee retention, especially with our organization, I think we do a fantastic job at really highlighting why we do and what we do, why it's so important at the end of the day. And so
Mm.
we've had really good success with that.
I love questioning the why. Love applying that to just, you could apply it to almost
Yeah,
anything we do. Like, why are we
sure,
doing this? Right?
sure,
Like, why
absolutely.
am I driving here right now? What am I doing? Yeah. Um, you mentioned lack of clear goals, and I'd love to talk more about that. Everyone listening, everyone we know, everyone is dealing with some level of goal setting, whatever it is. How do what? How have you found success with setting goals, and what framework
Sure.
could you share?
So, what I like to do personally is, and I think what our organization has done is that, we have not only global goals, we have departmental goals, right? We're a large organization worldwide. So what I tend to do is, and what the expectation, I think, from our line managers and senior leadership is that, from an organizational standpoint, we are looking to support the larger global agenda. And so, on an annual basis, when I'm looking at, my following year performance goals, what I like to do is to, reference what the global outlook is for the following year, and then start to kind of paint a picture on how I can contribute to that at our local level. And so, to give you an example, so our organization, as most, we have very stringent environmental goals, right? So we're chasing net zero by 2030, net negative by 2035, and so, with that, if you have a fundamental understanding of your operation, and I think that that's critical, you have an idea of where you can contribute to that greater good. And so, for us trying to really make an impact on our lowering our water consumption, lowering carbon consumption. What we've been able to do is target specific systems where, and again, regardless of capital investment, is there opportunity within these systems to provide some level of, consumption reduction and or savings? And then, if it does require some level of investment, we can also work that into our goals where, that is part of our trajectory for that year. Come up with a business case justification, in order to, again, to justify the business case for that capital investment supporting, that reduction. So I think that, if you align yourself with with your organization's, larger deliverables, and then work back from departments down to the personal goal, I think it'll really set you up for success for that year. And then frankly, you're providing that contribution to the organization to say, I was a part of that success, right? I helped our organization achieve that win. And so, in hindsight, looking back on my past performance years, a lot of good success stories. We've made a lot of good impacts, and that all comes from proper planning, and ensuring that
Mm.
your goals are aligned personally with the organization. So that's something that I
I,
found a lot of success with.
I appreciate that so much. Absolutely love that you brought it to the, I'd say 100,000 square foot, square foot. You can tell the business I work in, 100,000 foot level, right?
Sure.
It's amazing because and then you bring the why into it and you tie it all the way back to the personal success that person helped to achieve that ultimate goal
Sure.
for the company. That's amazing. Yeah, it's excellent. Great explanation. Thank you for running through it.
Sure. Of course. Of
Um,
course.
I just want to back up to something else you said, David, and that was the company can start to lose the lack the competitive edge they might have had previously if there's disengagement with employees. And I don't know how you might tie that, or if you'd tie that back to our
Sure.
just previous discussion there.
Sure. So what I mean by that is, again, in terms of the lack of competitive edge, that occurs when disengagement happens really in several ways. So, when the teams are disengaged, it promotes higher turnover, significant talent loss. And, I'm from the position, within any organization, your people are your greatest assets, right? In terms of contributors. And so,
100%.
you know, we have spent a significant amount of time and investment in developing what I would consider a tier one team here at our organization. And so keeping those individuals engaged at all times and, having that sense of purpose when they show up to work every day, contributing to that greater good, it only benefits the company from a competitive edge, and it allows greater efficiencies within operation, which in turn, affects our R&D, right? So
Mhm.
that has a direct effect on our ability to, to support our science, support our scientists, and allow them to have, again, whether it's uninterrupted utilities, whether it's ensuring that all of their process controls are functioning properly. All of that ends up adding up to faster R&D at the end of the day, and it allows us to get treatments to market faster.
Hey, rock stars. If you're tuning into the podcast and are feeling overwhelmed by all the maintenance demands at your facility, don't stress. We've got you covered. Our sponsor, Coludis, is your go-to partner to help you tackle all those demands and get them done right, on time, and with top-notch quality. From project planning to execution, Coludis is there to make hard work easy. Visit coludis.com today to get started. Outstanding. All right. I hope everyone was listening to David's 5 pillars for personal and organizational. And if not, move back in the episode and I'd listen to it again. That was a lot of great data. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate
Of
that.
course. Previously, we talked about change management process and how that's become a best practice for you.
Sure. Sure.
Could you expand on that a bit, please?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, I'm of the philosophy that, all organizations should be adhering to a strict and robust change management practice, period, end of story. And so the reasons why is that, in the life science realm, we are governed by, of course, regulatory compliance. So we have frameworks that we have to work within, that we're accountable to, which is very important. Also, data integrity and traceability. So, in terms of research and experiments, they have to be reproducible, right? And also traceable. So uncontrolled changes, have impact to that, right? We want to ensure that our data has confidence, that it has the integrity needed in order to get to pipeline. I would also say cross-functional impact. So, you know, and again, from our organization, hard services isn't the only supporting function, right, at this facility. So the changes that we make have cross-functional impact as it relates to IT, as it relates to lab operations, as it relates to regulatory, as it relates to production. So again, not being aligned and aware of changes can certainly impact their work, and we don't want to see that happen. We also don't want to avoid any type of costly errors and delays,
Mm-hmm.
right? Unnecessary downtime, more importantly. And so, I think that, having that change management process, having, a vetted and successful change management process is really going to stave off a lot of headache. It's going to stave off a lot of loss of productivity, a lot of, excess downtime, and it's going to ensure that, we are continuing to provide the infrastructure required to our scientists to perform their daily function.
I love this topic. It's a topic that personally I've been challenged with. We go through it as an organization ourselves. Everybody does. So, how do you know when it's too early or too late to share the change that's coming?
Yeah, sure. Again, in terms of being too early, I'm of the position that, you really can't be too early in communicating change. I think there's a lot of value in being transparent about change, receiving feedback from the respective stakeholders, that are affected by that change. And it allows you to prepare appropriately for that change. Um, you know, a lot of our organizations have, and I think where it lends credence is continuous improvement strategies, right? So continuous improvement is always circumvented around change. And I think that, and we're very fortunate here where we don't operate in silos. All of our work streams work together, holistically. And I think we have a great communication strategy between us all. And that'll only help, really empower that change and ensure that whatever change is coming down the road, is effective, that it serves the purpose, and that captured appropriately, and that it's communicated effectively, to all parties. In terms of being too late, I think the easy answer would be there's an impact, right? So we don't want it to get to that point. So, And that goes as far as, changes to process, changes to infrastructure. It can all have, similar impact. And so what we're trying to do is, again, ensure that uptime availability of all of our systems, have zero impact to science, ensure that they have the tools that they need to succeed, and again, hedging on that continuous improvement strategy, really ensuring that our projects are vetted appropriately in order to get the end result that we're looking for, and that's, tracked appropriately.
Excellent. I love something else you said, that you don't operate in silos, right? You look, I think you used the word
Sure.
holistic. How did that get created? Was there a time when you were working in silos? How did you create this framework
Sure.
or culture?
Well, I'd love to take credit for it, but I can't. This organization, especially at our operations site here in Boston, it have always worked in a collaborative environment. And I think what's nice is that despite the work streams that we all represent, we really have a lot of talented people who span multiple work streams in terms of knowledge. So we found it extremely beneficial that, if we were faced with a problem or if we had, something to work through, that you really don't just have one resource, to go to try to get an answer. You have multiple people that, have significant experience with multiple work streams that can provide you some insight, as to how to, achieve that objective or kind of circumvent that challenge. And so, a lot of times I find that, and again, a lot of our, we have weekly operations meetings with the entire team. So, we're able to get feedback in terms of impact, in terms of, direction and how to achieve, whatever we're looking forward to. So I think it's been, really successful here. I know that's not always the case with a lot of organizations, but
Mhm.
it is certainly been beneficial for us to do that because a lot of times, when you have open forum discussions, you're going to get feedback that you may not necessarily have considered, right? Going
Mhm.
to, one source. So, my father used to tell me that, four eyes are better than two, so I'm of the same position that, 12 brains are better than one. And so, it's really done, our site, good, real good.
That's outstanding. And personally, I could not agree more. In our organization, we work very much the same way, and the collaboration is where, let's say, where the magic happens, because you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely. Yep. Couldn't
Right?
agree more.
Can you tell us about what's behind you? I've been meaning to ask, because now this won't help people who are just listening, but anyone who's taking this in on YouTube will know what I mean. Like, that
Sure,
is
sure.
cool, man. What is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is our compound for Lynparza. So it's a cancer therapy, that AstraZeneca derived. So we, several of our conference rooms has this theme where, we put our compounds on the wall. So I think it's a really, it's a nice addition in terms of the aesthetics to the organ, in terms of, the site. And I think it's a good representation of the successes that we've had along the way, as far as some of the therapies that we've derived. So, yeah, very, very cool. Very
I
cool.
love that. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love it.
Thank you.
So go check us out on YouTube so you can see what's behind David. You won't be disappointed. Um, I want to jump to a discussion around, maybe one of the biggest challenges you've faced,
Sure.
and how you worked through that, worked with it. I'd love you to blow that one up a bit, because we've talked previously, and yeah, go right ahead, please.
Sure. So, we spoke previously about, our organization having, pursued IFM. And I know that that's, a pretty common approach these days with a lot of organizations is really consolidating all of your non-core business function, right? And having third party oversee, that service delivery. So, a majority of my career, prior to, my time with the SFM was really all hard service focused. And so, we did contract management, we managed SLAs, we had a little bit of input into budgeting. But now, as of late 2020 or early 2021, excuse me, I was given the opportunity to be unit director here, for the mobilization of the SFM and subsequently the IFM service model. And so, historically, I had no experience with janitorial, with soft services, workplace services, however you'd like to categorize it. I certainly had no experience with food service, I could tell you that, nor with AV components, any audiovisual. And so for me, the biggest challenge was understanding finance, right?
Hmm.
Understanding, because at that time, I knew what a budget was, but I had no idea at that time what a P&L was. I had no idea what forecasting was. So effectively what I had to do was I had about a 3 to 4 month period where, I like to tell my wife I had to go through the homeschool MBA program, and really leverage a lot of resources. Started with reading a lot of books, Essentials of Finance and Accounting for Non-Financial Managers by Edward Fields, I think was a fantastic read. Also Financial Intelligence for Executives by Karen Berman, really gave me a lot of insight into kind of the larger impact to organizations as it relates to, the site local level and how those finances kind of impact the bigger picture. Um, and then really leveraging peers within my network. Not sure if I'd mentioned I'm co-chairing the BOMA Boston Engineering Committee this year and next, and I was able to utilize my network.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I was
Yeah.
really able to leverage my network with peers in my industry who have taken upon this challenge, who have entered the IFM realm, and it's just a simple discussion. Lessons learned, best practices, right? What were some of the
Mm-hmm.
challenges that you had? How did you overcome this? And so, with a lot of work, and then, also, taking advantage of some of your, I know as far as what I did is I leveraged our finance professionals within our organization. Take me for a budget walk, allow me to understand, how our operational expenditures are formatted, understanding fixed versus variable cost and the impact there, understanding why the forecasts are important. Really just doing a full budget walk with them to get an understanding of what those services are and the financial impact, and then more so how that translates in terms of reporting to our taxonomy services, right? So it gets you into a new mindset where, you have to be detail oriented, you have to understand your services, understand your business, and then also understand from a contractual basis what's at risk, right? So in terms of performance, and again, there are plenty of contracts that have fee at risk. So, I really wanted to ensure that I did my due diligence and homework to ensure that, my output was commensurate with expectations. And then
Mm-hmm.
also that, we were achieving our contract targets, more importantly. Um, but yeah, that was, mobilizing IFM here at our Waltham location, again, understanding OPIs and KPIs in work streams that you have no experience with, right? So, it I didn't have a lot of time to come up to speed as far as understanding the SLAs, around those services, and also understanding the importance where, again, going back to janitorial, I had no experience with janitorial SOPs. And we have a very robust vivarium here, and that's, a critical operating parameter of our vivarium in terms of janitorial is ensuring that those SOPs are being followed properly and that we're accountable to that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think, that experience in and of itself was extremely challenging. I was very out of my element, and so very uncomfortable. And so, with that being said, this ties back to being willing to do things outside of your comfort zone, right?
Can you
So
pause there for a second?
sure,
I have a question because that is so on point, right? The fact that you put yourself out there and were able to be vulnerable and uncomfortable and all like that. What I'm hearing is that's how you learned all of this.
sure,
So I just want to flip a little bit here and ask you this now. What advice would you give people who might be hesitating with that? And, what advice would you give to people that may not have already put themselves out there in a risky manner like that?
sure. Well, I go back to to my analogy that you are not truly experiencing growth unless you're uncomfortable. So
Hmm.
never get too comfortable, right? If you have aspirations to be, a leader in whatever industry that you're supporting, you have to be willing to, climb outside that box and experience new things. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. You will be forced to have to learn, but I always had a vision in my mind throughout my career that, and this is the standard that I held myself to, was that, and post college, post Mass Maritime, getting into the field, I always had this vision of what I considered a facility manager and the standard that I would hold myself to in order to call myself a facility manager. And that vision was always having a fundamental understanding of all aspects of the operation. And that includes soft services, hard services, food service, any service delivery from a facilities operation, that is contributing, to the betterment, into the, to the goal of that organization. And so I think you really have to, take on those new experiences in order to, and again, just my own perception here, in order to feel comfortable in my own skin to call myself a facility manager at one point in my career, that I had to have those experiences, right? I had to be uncomfortable. I had a necessity to learn things that, I had no prior knowledge of, and I understood the commitment that came with that, the obligation, but I knew that the end result was going to make me a more seasoned, a better, facility manager at the end of the day.
Good for you. Good for you, David. Thank you. Thank you for expanding on that. You
Sure.
mentioned something else. You had to assess what's at risk. We're still talking with the IFM framework here. How did you do that? How did you identify the risk factors?
Sure. Well, again, we understand our contracts. I think that's the single most important thing, understanding what's at stake. But again, there's a lot of intangible risks, right? Because, and I'll tie that back to, how my performance can affect our client's brand, right? If we're not performing to expectations, if we're not achieving our key performance indicators, our operational performance indicators, that directly impacts client operations at the end of the day. Period. End of story. So, you have to acknowledge that my performance is tied to how or how this site is looked at in terms of on the global portfolio, the North America portfolio. So you have to take pride in that, right? So what you do is, I sat down and I said, okay, in terms of, and again, going back to the financial impacts, if I go over budget, what's that impact, right? If I don't achieve those OPIs, what is the impact to that contract and to my organization? Okay, providing those services. What impact am I fostering in terms of our clients, right? So, again, and I don't like to harp on finance necessarily, but productivity, right? What are the productivity impacts that we're having on our science, on our user groups, more
Sure.
importantly, right? So, and to me, it was very easy because I have such a passion for life sciences, and that's stemming from personal experiences, right? As many millions of Americans have, right? So, family who have disease, my wife herself with her recent cancer journey. I like to keep that at the forefront of how I operate, knowing that, you know, we have to hedge those risks and we have to understand what we're doing within that operation in order to mitigate those risks, more importantly, in order to get to the end result that we're looking for. So,
Thank you for sharing that personal touch too, and so happy for your wife with a positive outcome, David.
yes, thank you so
It's
much.
very
Thank
very
you.
good. Of course, of course. Um, or maybe touch a little bit more on who you are in just a moment, and we're going to get to contact information shortly at the end of the show here. But you mentioned homeschool MBA, and you kind of joked about it, but seriously speaking, I think everything you just shared,
Mhm.
people could reach out to you if they chose to, and hey, you can make it a David Diamore MBA, call it whatever you will. But I think a lot of people could learn from this topic from you, right?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's just, being aggressive, right? You have to be your own champion. And I do
Hmm.
this, I've done this my entire career where, and even today's day and age where we have so many digital capabilities at our disposal, AI, we have other conduits that can provide us efficiencies. And I tell people all the time, if your organization isn't going to invest in you, invest in yourself. I'm a huge advocate for that. Um, so again, lots of there are lots of resources out there. Don't be afraid to, pursue things like Coursera, LinkedIn Learning. I think there's a lot of a lot of great resources out there. Within those platforms. Local schools, and again, your local library. Half of my education could have been acquired at my local library with a little bit of motivation, right? So, it's something to be said for being, for a little bit of perseverance.
Outstanding. My son told me yesterday that he's in college now, and he says, "Dad, I think I learned more on YouTube than I did in high school." I was
Sure.
like, yeah, so we should talk a bit
Hope,
more about that.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully,
Um,
none of the bad things.
no, no, it was definitely positive stuff, but man, that
Great.
was,
Yeah.
it made me think,
Yeah, I
really
mean,
think,
it's
right?
amazing how many resources are at our fingertips today. I look
Hmm.
back even, through my earlier years and, we didn't have half of the resources that we have today. So, I think it's such a special time, especially with the younger generations coming up now where, with the AI, answers are a fingertip away.
Certainly are.
Being able to feed a process document into, AI and have it, pull out key points and, pull out pinch points. I think it's just, but again, it's a give and take, right?
Hmm.
I also believe in learning the fundamentals, right? Having that foundation that's critically important. You can't rely on technology all the time. We talk about this often, with our, historical central plant operations where, automation is wonderful, but what happens when it doesn't work, right? We
Hmm.
have to go back to operating the plant and know how to do that effectively to, in order to maintain, our utility delivery. So yeah, I think, yeah, really, really exciting time.
Couldn't agree more. Great stuff. All right, you have shared a tremendous amount of valuable data with us and your experience and everything else. Tell us a little bit more about you. What do you do outside of all of this cool
Sure.
stuff?
Yeah. No, I'm an avid fisherman, love fishing.
Freshwater or saltwater?
Saltwater. Yeah, generally, I'm not
Mm.
really a freshwater guy. On occasion. Yeah, so in the summers, often be out with my family, with my cousin, out chasing tuna, out in Stellwagen.
Oh, the
Also
big
avid
game.
gardener. Oh yeah, yeah, we like the big fish. Avid gardener. So I have a rather large garden at my home. That's generational, right? I'm first generation American. My father and mother born in Italy, so we gardening is a very very big part of our lives. So happy to say we've had a very slim produce bill over probably the last 10 years. So that's been fun. And just spending time with my wife, traveling, getting to experience new things. We have such a good time exploring conservation lands, hiking. Um, and then other things that I'm a part of. Also within my local community, kind of giving back to the community. So, I work with our local Freemason organization and working with our community on, providing, anything that they would need effectively, things from food banks to, to clothing, to helping kids in school financially. So, we've done a lot of great things there. And I'm an avid guitar player, so I love playing my guitars. Spend a lot of time doing that. That's mandatory every night. So my wife knows I need
Wow.
my minimum 1 hour to decompress, and I think that's an important part of the day is being able to decompress when you get home. So,
All right,
yep,
another question on that topic. Electric or acoustic?
both, but I prefer electric.
What style of music?
Yeah, I generally like indie music, jam band. Is
Cool.
what my preference is. Any rock generally. Yeah, just went out and bought myself a nice Les Paul. So my wife wasn't too thrilled, but
Ooh, that's a nice one. Congrats.
thank you. She appreciates it though. It pays it's the gift that keeps on giving back, as I like to tell her.
Perfect. Great way to put it. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for sharing. And that's by the way, you're doing a lot of really cool, important stuff, personally speaking, too. Like the
Thank you.
food bank and kids, and like really,
Sure.
really great stuff. We have to
Yep.
get out to Stellwagen together. It's been way too long since I've
Yes.
been out there.
Yes. Be happy to. Be happy to.
Um, Mentioned just a few moments ago that you could share how to get in touch with you for
Sure.
your MBA, the David Diamore MBA system, right? So, but seriously speaking, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do so?
Sure. They can reach me by email, david.diamore@astrazeneca.com. Happy to answer any questions, provide any insight. I always love talking. So, happy to engage with anyone.
Excellent, excellent. Well, David, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show and truly investing your time. Very grateful for that. Thanks for joining us today.
Jay, appreciate the opportunity to be on. Really, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you for everyone who's listening. If you liked the show, if you laughed, if you learned something, I'm sure you did. Tell someone else about the show. It's been another great episode of Facility Rockstars. We'll see everybody next time.
It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books.
Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.